Hi, my name's Rohan.
Hi, my name is Peter VanNess.
Today I'll be interviewing Peter, who got his bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering and computer science from Georgia Tech. So to start off with, what was your experience in high school and made you decide on your major?
Sure, it's a funny story. I grew up in Oklahoma, and I really loved the idea of being a meteorologist when I grew up. But my dad worked at the government, and he was able to print off a huge stack of satellite imagery analysis, like data, basically data and like how to do it. And that sat there for a number of months. And eventually one day my dad said, "Hey, do you really think you like meteorology? Because that's been sitting there for a long time." And I was like, "I agree." And I had been working with computers for a little bit since at that point in time. And he actually told me, like, what do you think about computer science or computer engineering? Mostly is what he actually was talking about. And that kind of got the wheels churning for me of the thought of engineering. I really hadn't put any thought on engineering before then. And so I credit it to my dad pushing me to consider all alternatives or avenues. And from there, it was kind of a snowball effect of moving to Georgia to be closer to Georgia Tech. It was a prestigious school, and it gave me an opportunity to, go into some of the high schools that feed into that. And one of the things that I really appreciated, one was my brother led the way and did some college classes during his high school curriculum, and actually he was able to graduate early. And so I basically took the same path, but what I did was I was able to enroll in a joint enrollment program where I was able to take college classes that took it gave me high school credit. So me going through that was an amazing experience. I highly recommend to anyone who isn't hyper attached either through sports or band or some sort of extracurricular that's tied to the school, where you could forego your senior year and you don't really have an attachment to high school and you want to kind of get a leg up. I was able to come into my college career with a number of college credits and almost be a sophomore. And so my senior year was fully on campus. I actually wasn't even able to come to the high school campus without like being a guest. And I think there's ways to balance that. You can probably still can keep your, if you have that opportunity in your high schools, wherever you're at, you may be able to balance that and still keep those extracurriculars. But for me, it was impactful to get the college experience, have college level courses, and also I got away with doing some of it at a local school that was a little more straightforward. My only caveat there would be if you're going to a prestigious engineering school such as Georgia Tech or whatever, MIT or whatever, don't skimp on the math. My biggest tip would be on that one. I took Calculus 1 and it was fun and it was great to learn it in college even. But in the smaller school setting, I I was not well prepared for literally some gaps in knowledge that were highly expected. Like within a week, I realized there's going to be a quiz or an exam on something, and it required this base knowledge, and I didn't have it, so I had to scramble to find that. So my tip is don't skimp on the math or science. Though took chemistry in my at that one local school, and I really fell in love with chemistry, even though I'm not a chemist. So it was really a lot of fun. It gave me a lot of insight into atoms and electrons, and that plays into really a lot of the physics that you start to learn when you go to college. Um, from there, I graduated from high school slash did the last year in college, and then I went to Georgia Tech. And one of um, the first things I did was took which a lot of people do, everyone probably does at this point, is take a computer science introduction course in a bigger engineering focused university. Even if you're not in engineering, I think everyone has to take an intro to computer science course, and I highly recommend it anyway. But so that's where I started to find out that I really actually had a knack for coding and understanding some of the computer sciencey stuff. It was nowhere near computer science as I learned later, but it was the building blocks and gave me some confidence, and I was able to help other people in my class. So that's the other thing I would encourage you to do. I know you may have heard of it, but um, teach. You really know something when you're able to teach it. And so my encouragement is whatever you grasp that you have an inkling of ability and maybe some adeptness at, my recommendation would be to then go and try to teach someone, because then you'll really know if you know it or not. And it'll also just embolden you to be able to uh, uh, really understand the subject matter and the techniques and all that.
Yeah.
So that's hopefully I was giving you a pause. I've talked a lot, but is that good so far?
Yeah, no, that definitely helped me a lot trying to teach people as well. Um, I'm not enrolled. They have a program kind of like what you did at my school, where you can do your 11th and 12th grade at a local community college. I know some people doing that, but then like I'm doing AP classes and stuff. So that's definitely helped. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's different ways to do it for sure.
So what was your experience like at Georgia Tech then?
Yeah, I recently had the privilege of going back there after a number of years, and it brought back so many memories. So it's fresh in my mind because I was thinking, oh boy, I could come back here all the time just to chill on this campus. Because really, Georgia Tech, for example, is very unique that it's surrounded by the one of the biggest cities, but it's like a city within a city. So it's kind of isolated, insulated, and has its own really amazing infrastructure and charm and focus on the student life as well as whatever is going on at Tech. There's a lot of that stuff that goes on, and so it's beautiful. It's got seasons, so I don't know if you guys up north have summer much, but it has summer. Definitely has summer. It's in the south, but it also in Atlanta has snow, so I got to experience snow and the
They do
hot.
get
So
snow?
it does get snow. There was actually a snowpocalypse about 10 years ago or so in Atlanta. That was quite crazy. And so it's closer to the mountains. So you actually have an hour to 2 hour drive, and you get to be in the Tennessee mountains or the Blue Ridge Mountains, what they call them. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of awesome stuff in Atlanta. So my biases, I recommend looking into Georgia Tech. It's a great school. Um, but that's the cool thing about going to college is if you don't go to someplace that's in your hometown, you get to really experience a place really fresh and get to experience the culture, but also kind of get to be a little bit isolated from it. So you get to be like a fish out of water in a good way. And so you get to explore it with fresh eyes, basically, which is nice.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that cater to college students too. So there's that as well. So
Yeah. So I see that there's a gap between your bachelor's and your master's. Were you doing a job then?
yeah, so I'd be happy to talk about that, and then we can go backwards to some of the stuff in the undergrad. But to explain the gap, and I think it's an important one to get out the gate too, is if you're listening to this and you're in high school, you have some time to hold on to this information, but maybe not exactly. I went to work right after undergrad. I got a job in offer in November, and I graduated in May, and I went to work. And then my company was able to support me to pay for my degree, for my master's degree. And what I chose to do was Georgia Tech actually offers an online master's of science of computer science. And it was intentionally low cost. So I was actually able to pay for a lot of it through reimbursement through my company. And it also supported me to because it was online. I lived in Houston. I didn't have to go back to Atlanta or go to somewhere that specifically that's local, which there was a lot of options. Rice University, Houston, University of Houston. I could potentially even have done College Station, but for Texas A&M. But instead, I really was keen on. I liked the program, obviously my alma mater, and I was able to get a get the bug to go back. And the reason why I did that, I mean, it's twofold. One, it felt right. It felt like the timing was right, which I'll talk to in a second. And two, uh, the fact that it was reimbursed, and then also just to kind of refresh myself because I felt like being what I was doing for work was pretty specific, and I wanted to kind of go back and get a little bit more broad computing knowledge. What I discovered is I went straight into work and I went to very specific stuff that had a lot of hardware information pieces and some very firmware coding. But some of the computing stuff, I actually did learn some of it in undergrad, and I relearned it in masters. And that was an interesting experience. Is like, I know I've learned this before, but I've forgotten it because I didn't have to know all of it. Because with firmware, you don't have to have all the higher operating system concepts. You can actually get away with a lot more because it's a lot lower level and it's more bare bones and has different requirements, and it still requires a lot of technique and understanding and of principles. And even these days now, actually, you can't get away from firmware coding very far and not have a lot of those concepts under your belt, because a lot of firmware these days, the computing power is so condensed, you actually end up having a lot of them have Linux OSs on them. And so you have these basic fundamentals of computing and operating systems that have to be applied to the firmware as well. So having that under your belt is very important. I'll go back to the timing felt right. My encouragement is don't do what I did, which was wait 5 years to go back to get a master's in something technical. You can wait as long as you want. You can do it whenever you want. But in terms of if you're going to go ahead and do it anyway, don't wait 5 years. Think about what's the potential that you could do it. And I could have done the reimbursement stuff anytime. The timing was right for the program that I was going into, so it would have been more difficult or more expensive if I'd done it through a different program. So I don't regret what I did, but in terms of how difficult it was to reintegrate into doing school life, I believe there's a lot of flexibility that gets lost when you get into the workforce and you go like 2+ years. So you get 3 and 4 and 5 years. Once you get to 5 years, being able to flex between the full-time work that you're doing and the schooling stuff, it's a routine that you're not used to, that it took a little longer for me to get used to. And it was, I think that just in general, the flexibility for when you're younger and you're still fresh on that school stuff, as much as it's counterintuitive, you want to get rid of, you've been going for 14 years, 15, 16, whatever years, number of years, and you want to just be done. There's a temptation for that. And I get that. Just consider wisely, 5 years out of college, how willing are you going to be to get that master's, and do you still really want it? Or if you still really want it, there may be some benefits to trade-offs to do it a little earlier. That's my 2 cents there.
Yeah. So you said you want to talk a little bit more about your undergrad again?
Yeah, sure. I didn't really speak much about my experience in actual classes. One, if you're listening to this and you're in high school, just know that it's really real that college classes are designed to cut up get the shaft, whatever the extra is that won't make the cut. They're trying to cut you, basically. There's an intentionality to that. It's not trying. I don't think it's necessarily being vindictive or like, we don't want to get these people in here or anything malicious, but it's just designed to make sure that you're prepared for the rest of the time. So just be prepared for that. And if you just do your work and focus and don't goof off, then it's not that hard to get through in terms of it's not impossible to get through. It's able to be done. It's hard, but it's not impossible. And then also just don't be afraid to take courses that may not matter so much to the end goal, but that are stretch you and get you to the point of being like don't worry about things that like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to use this. Like, this is not important, but it's like really interesting to you. You're in college, you're able to absorb a ton. Balance your stress for sure, and balance your mental health. Make sure you have mental health. But beyond that, don't be afraid to go to a class. I took Physics 3, Intro to Modern Physics, which is basically the beginnings of quantum physics, just because I wanted to. And it was one of my favorite. I think I got a B. And I did, it stinks that I got a B. It's a bad story there. But it was one of my favorite non-A's, I guess you would say. And it didn't even have a lot of application to what I'm doing, but it's just a lot of fun. So my encouragement is just to continue to seek out maybe some ways to stretch you and to be able to give you insights that are different than you expect, that you would normally expect in your straight and narrow path, for example, with electrical or computer engineering.
Yeah. Did you do physics in high school or your senior year when you're at the college?
I did physics before that. So before I did college I did physics in junior year of high school,
Mhm.
and I did chemistry twice. Basically, I think I did. I get intro to chemistry, and then I did full on. I don't know what it was. It wasn't. I think
AP.
it was a physics, and then I did my chemistry in my college
Hmm.
course. So yeah,
Um,
and then but
or you were saying how obviously like the college is way smaller than Georgia Tech. They did your senior year at. Um, do you like the smaller class setting of that compared to a big school?
yeah. Well, to be fair, it wasn't smaller in the sense of like more fewer people. There were some smaller classes. In terms of being a non-engineering school, what I appreciated most was that it was like not focused on that. So it gave me some perspectives. And so got some of those classes. Interestingly enough, a lot of the classes that I took there, outside of the chemistry and calculus, they would be more like people going to those classes in those schools are more serious about that because it's more like arts or history or social sciences, some of that stuff that I took. And so I actually got the benefit of people who really cared about that stuff and not going to an engineering school where they just throw it away. I really liked learning about history. And so I got to be in an amazing class talking about some small classes. I did have a world history class, and it was one of my favorite classes, honestly. I think it was all the way up to I can't remember. I can't remember. I think it was all the way up to 1942, and it's like a certain range or whatever. And it was just a lot of fun, and like it inspired a lot of discourse. And you have a lot of people who are serious about that discourse. And then you have I had an English class, but it was because of this joint enrollment program. They instituted this special course that other people could take, so it was mixed, but they encouraged people to take this one. It was a composition, or it was English comp one, um, and philosophy together. And so they like did this like combined, both classes kind of had some, you learned about things in the different classes that helped with the other class, which was really a lot of fun. And I don't think I would have been able to find that at Georgia Tech. Maybe I would have. I'm not saying that Georgia Tech wouldn't have that, because Georgia Tech has a great social sciences kind of area of things. But it's an engineering school. And so it's in terms of the people who are there, there's a smaller subset of people who are focused on that, and there's going to be a larger number of people who just need it just to get past it. I'm not saying anything about those people, but I can't speak to some of the experiences at Georgia Tech for that because I took it at this other school. I really enjoyed it. It is a smaller campus. It was a smaller campus, so don't get me wrong there. You're right. And doing that was really nice because what did feel, one, it was less walking. Georgia Tech is a mile and a half wide, and I have had classes that were a mile and a half away from each other, and it was pretty insane in like 10, 15 minutes to get there. So those are the fun days. But in general, they had their charms both ways, and their benefits both ways. And so I wouldn't trade my time at either school. Both were beneficial to me, and I was able to make the most of each one of them.
Yeah. So next, can you talk a little bit about your internship at AT&T?
Sure, that one was a lot of fun and very interesting too. I've been doing my co-op for a number of semesters, which was local to the campus. And because of my number of credits I got entering into Georgia Tech, I was able to do a co-op of the second semester. This is not normal. You would not normally go straight into a co-op after your second semester. And so the benefit of me having the credits, I was able to do that. I don't know if that hindered me a little bit. I still took classes while I was doing co-ops because it was local on campus. And so I was able to get the campus experience, but also work co-op. But it was through Georgia Tech Research Institute, which is attached to Georgia Tech. And by the time I had been doing that for 3 semesters or so, I was like, I need something that's actually a little bit outside of where I've been doing right now. I've been like very just so Georgia Tech heavy. Let me do something that's going to get me out of there. And this program was amazing. I hope it's still going on, but it was a summer internship program that was designed to be more than just an internship program, and it was just really well done. They had um, executive leaders come in every week and have conversations with us. One of them was one of the I don't know if he was like the head division of a division or whatever, and he had written a book, and so he actually gave us all his book, and we got to read that and understand like his story and his journey for his career. And just like anytime you get a whiff, a sense that there's these kind of opportunities are coming your way where the benefit is on you as a student, like the breaks you get as a student and or the benefits of wanting to pour into you as much as possible to support your career, those things happen more as a student, right? And then not to say that as a career development that doesn't exist in the job field, but there's something special about it. You are a certain class of of career citizens, which is to say where there's an intentionality to pour into you in a certain way. And this was one of those times. That was a great series. Everyone was kind of tight knit because of the meeting every week, and we were all kind of part of the program. We kind of kept together, and we would go out to eat lunch, and so that was so cool. I'm not going to say that all the internships are like that. There is some of that going on at pretty much every uh, job, like even AMD, I know has they coordinate events and they make it work where you can, it's enhanced. It's not just the work. You're getting an opportunity to do more to engage. But I enjoyed that one a lot. The funny thing about that from a work perspective was I was given a task to do something relating to mapping or GIS, global information, geolocation information systems, whatever it is. And they had a problem with they had a lot of data that they needed to correlate, and they wanted to have a a way to, excuse me, they were trying to optimize. This is like part of the company where it's in the mobility and cellular, and they needed to optimize their transitions between cell towers. And so that team was one that was optimizing uh, um, those paths. So like if you're going down a highway, you would need to transition to cell tower eventually. They optimize to make sure that like you minimize those transitions because those transitions have a higher incidence of dropped calls. And so what you don't necessarily realize is that the cell towers are networked in such a way and connected in such a way that you won't drop those calls on the most critical and most common pathways. So what they needed was a way to integrate that data in a more dynamic way. And what I found within like 2 or 3 weeks was that there's already an effort to have a more broad AT&T GIS system that had a way to you could give them your data and you could and you could incorporate it into their system already. And so where I was going to have to reinvent the wheel was given to me right away, and I was able to actually leverage the rest of the time to take on other tasks because I actually finished that task within a month. So that was really kind of cool. It taught me a lot that I think I still use today, which is a lot of what you do in your career, your success is going to come down to networking. And it's not just to say networking to get a job. I personally believe that networking to get a job is highly important, but honestly, I've used it in all aspects of my career, both to bolster my ability to understand things. I ask a lot of questions. I connect with enough people. I say, how do I understand this? Who do I need to talk to? I give that person's information and I go and I talk to them and I ask them questions. And it comes to another thing where they have someone I need to talk to. I'm not going to stop the chain as long as it's clear that there's a benefit to me understanding something. I'm going to continue to kind of reach out and build because it's a team effort in general to tackle some of the biggest challenges that hopefully your company is trying to do, whatever company you would join. But that's where this internship really taught me a lot about I'm not going to necessarily one, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. So is there a wheel out there already? And two, my best work is going to be building on top of giants or of people who've gone before me. Right.
Yeah. Um, so as moving on, do you want to talk a little bit more about your job at Embedded, or do you want to move on to AMD?
I think you mean Hewlett Packard Enterprise.
Oh, I just read
Oh,
your title on accident. But
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, as an embedded firmware engineer. It was a bulk of my career up to this point in terms of number of years, I would say. Sure, we can start there and we can talk about my journey to AMD. I know we've been talking for a little bit of time. So yeah, as I had mentioned, this job is what I got from November, right before I graduated. I got the offer, and then June, right after I graduated, I joined Hewlett Packard Enterprise as a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed firmware engineer. What again, I use those principles of connecting, and I dove in and didn't know a thing, and just figured out whatever I could, and got uncomfortable, right? And not things I didn't necessarily know, or things that I thought I knew, and made sure that I actually knew them and connected with the right people. So as a firmware engineer, my highest recommendation, one is unfortunately, I do work remotely, but my best growth as an early engineer was done in a lab and sitting down as a firmware engineer, understanding the hardware. So if you're going into electrical engineering, um, understanding the hardware, definitely do as much as you can in college. And then as soon as you get into the job, you realize how much you don't know and understand what you don't know. And so connect with the right people. I had a great mentor I had a great hardware engineering mentor, and I had a great uh, firmware engineering mentor. And combined, they made my career what it is today. I sat with them hours on end as they worked or as they taught me, as they spent time with me, not just worked, but they also took time to sit down and show me things. Investing in those people by giving them your attention as they invest in you by giving you their expertise and their knowledge. There is nothing better in terms of growth, technically, as well as you get to glean a lot from them about life in the career field as well. You get to ask those questions because it's not all about the tech. You know, you get to understand too about that. So that is my biggest growth that I took, and it took that propelled me for a number of years. I think kind of accelerated a lot of what I was doing as I just paid attention, asked questions. I wasn't afraid to ask questions that made me look silly or wrong, because especially take advantage of it when you are young. You are unknown. You're an unknown quantity, and what you know is very little compared to what other people do. No offense, but it just is what it is. So take advantage of it and lean into it is my advice.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I guess we move on to uh your next job then.
Yeah, I'll segue. For Hewlett Packard Enterprise, I spent a number of years there, 11 years, and the job you want. Here's the essential piece there. The job you want to have, you should already be doing. And it's not to say that you're doing all of that job today, but you're practicing your next job in the current job you're in, basically. If you're doing it right, if you want to have a continuity to your career, the your next job you should be doing. This is true for rank or promotion as well as for job change, is my opinion. This is my experience. So for a long time, I'll just say that my career progression was very linear, doing a lot of the same things, building my knowledge, understanding, kind of increasing the scope. And so a lot of my day-to-day activity was continuing to stay curious, apply the technical things I have learned to tasks, um, continue to ask questions, continue to build rapport with people, continue to network. And so in the process of that, as well as a firmware engineer, I understood how to debug my code. I had to understand when there were big problems that happened. And having to do that when it was just me and it was my responsibility, um, building that rapport with folks, understanding and asking questions, being not afraid to say the hard things was a big one for me in my career at Hewlett Packard Enterprise. I was always wanting to advocate for collaboration, connection, cooperation, checking quality, checking ourselves on, are we doing things in the right way? Being kind of getting awareness of what is it we're trying to do. And if you get an awareness and you start to get stuck because this doesn't make sense, that may be a great time to say, hey, this doesn't make sense. And then that gives you the opportunity to unblock a whole product, for example, is one of the things that I got to do, because we had basically shipped an initial board that was wrong. It missed all the key elements of what the firmware engineering teams were trying to do. The hardware engineering team missed it, and the firmware engineering team missed giving those requirements. And so, like in general, we as a team missed this effort. And I had the privilege and opportunity to just be listening and have the rapport already that I had with the folks, the right people, hardware engineers, and the people that I interacted with on a daily basis who were making decisions. Even if you're in a specific role, or even if you're in maybe a lower tier role, everyone's contribution should be valued, and honestly is valuable. And just because you're at a certain place in your career doesn't mean you don't have the ability to listen, pay attention, and to understand when something isn't right. So that would be my lesson learned there. And I say all that because that really is those are the pieces that I was practicing that didn't exactly pertain all the ways to my task, but that prepared me for my segue into advanced micro devices, AMD. And that role was debug heavy, as well as technically leading the firmware teams, understanding the requirements that are needed from the validation organization, which is taking the deliverables from the firmware teams, as well as working with the firmware teams to understand the roadblocks and the pieces that are not well defined and helping to define them. And I took everything that I learned, the little pieces along the way, as well as my technical ability to understand the code and firmware as well, which was instrumental and critical as I built up my career. I had to continue to show myself able to technically provide collateral material for the company, but also there's intangible leadership qualities. They're tangible, but they're intangible in that they're only shown whenever you actually practice them and work them out. And they're not always something that are given to you. In fact, I'll just give you that right away. You're not always going to be told you're the leader. You're not always going to be told you're the leader. That doesn't mean you're not the leader. And I would highly encourage anyone who's listening, don't be afraid to be the leader. Don't try to steal power. Just understand when you do have the power. Relational equity versus positional equity is a thing. Look that up. Positional equity is when someone says you're a leader. Relational equity is when you actually affect being a leader in the people around you. And so all of that was able to funnel into prepared me for this next set of roles that I've been in for the last 2 years. And so now that I'm at Advanced Micro Devices, I engaged and was able to be part of the conversation and build rapport again, build an understanding of the system, understanding of what's going on, what is the goal, what are we trying to do, stay in the know about what's happening. I think we live in a very fast-paced world, and the career field is no different. If you feel like it's crazy trying to keep up with the world, just today with your high school or with the world in general, it doesn't go away when you get into the job. A lot of crazy stuff happens that just like crazy schedules, changes that can happen to the programs and the products that you're working on, and being able to stay atop of a lot of those things is a skill, and that is one that's practiced and acquired, not necessarily that you have right away, but that is one that you should look out for in improving over time, is to understand what is important and what is not, and throw away what's not important and take in what is, and start to build a map. Uh, uh, however you build your maps of your world around you, but build a map of what's going on, and that I think is really helpful, as well. And if you're in a leadership position, if you want to be in a leadership position, is to gain those skills to be able to build a map. Because when a leader, a higher up leader, executive starts to ask questions, and you can navigate that map quickly. If you don't have that map and you can't navigate to that point of understanding quickly, sometimes you get passed up and someone else gets the question and they answer the question. Sometimes you simply just sit in a room quietly and get stared at or whatever it is. And so being able to pivot and navigate that mapping of what's going on, and with your take on it and your spin and your perspective, being able to have an answer and perspective from that may or may not be right, but it's in the right direction. Like that's been hugely beneficial, right? That's some of the stuff I've learned. I know hopefully that has helped.
No, it
Me
was.
speaking about it is a good way to go, but
But yeah, I think that's all the time we have today then. Thank you for
great.
meeting with me.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Ron.